Welcome to Podcast of All Podcasts. Enjoy best moments of podcast history. So, some cool lady from Botswana playing with her hand on top of the guitar, and it's pretty fucking awesome. Marc Maron with Mike Myers.
I think most of improv could do with a rewrite. And I said, you can't say that. Then I was like, he's right.
So you do that, and you taught improv. You started that show there, and that became Whose Line Is It Anyways? Is that what you said?
I didn't start Whose Line Is It Anyways, but that group of people became Whose Line Is It Anyways.
That's amazing. You're part of this weird history, unknown comedy history.
It's very weird. And then when it came to New York, I'd just gotten on the cast of Saturday Night Live, and I was with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart and I both auditioned for the American Whose Line Is It Anyways. We didn't get it.
Before SNL?
After SNL.
Really?
I just thought I would do that as well.
But you were a made
contractually,
guy. You just wanted to...
I never felt made. I always felt like I was going to get fired every week. But
all right, so you come back to Toronto after England.
Yeah.
And you're...
Find out my dad is not well,
Oh.
which was the big decision to move back to Canada. He had Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to Chicago, Second City for a bit, and then I came back.
Who was down there then when you went there?
Bonnie Hunt.
Uh-huh.
Farley was just coming up. Favreau was there. He was on the door. I actually knew him.
Yeah.
I was good friends with Favreau. Still am friends with Favreau. It was an interesting time. My dad was ill, so I was very not happy.
Right.
And I knew he was not going to really make it. I was very sad to leave my comedy double act with Neil Malarkey. He and I rewrote So I Married an Axe Murderer together, and he's in it. He's also in Austin Powers 1 and Austin Powers 3. He's just a hilarious, great guy, and we just keep trying to
Work together?
But now we both have kids. It's very hard to do anything, you know.
Sure. So your dad was ill in 88.
Ill in 88.
And how long did he hang out for?
till 91. So he got very ill. Then I came back to Second City Toronto for the 15th anniversary of Second City Toronto, because Second City Toronto was a franchise of Second City Chicago.
Right.
And Pam Thomas, who was Dave Thomas's wife, who was also the producer of The Kids in the Hall. Right. And Martin Short saw me, and Dave Foley saw me at this anniversary show. And it was in two parts, so first act, intermission, second act. So after the first intermission, it was all famous people like Martin Short and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, what am I doing here, I feel like an idiot. I just happened to, on a technicality, be an alumni because I was at the Chicago Second City, just transferred down. And so I was downstairs in the bathrooms, where the cast bathrooms are. And I was like this, and I had that kind of I'm going to cry feel because I just felt like an idiot. And Foley went, "What's going on, dude?" I said, "I have to do this sketch, this Wayne Campbell sketch, and they don't know who I am. I just feel like an idiot." Up there, he grabbed me, he said, "Dude, it's going to kill." I went, "What?" He goes, "No, it's going to kill. You're going to steal the show, dude. You're going to totally steal the show." So I went out and I stole the show. I went out. It was like I started in the house, heckling this gal who's playing my girlfriend in the sketch. And the sketch just exploded, and cheer stomps, whistles, standing ovation, and then everything I was in was a standing ovation.
So you do this thing where you killed, but you already knew the kids by the time you...
Yes, that's right.
Because you were at Second City, and you'd go watch them, and you're like, this is the art.
I would come back to Second City, and I'd go, "I have seen the future, and it is The Kids in the Hall." Right. When I saw their pilot, Dave said, "You want to come over to my house and see the pilot?" I got nervous because I thought, what if it's really good? And
that's weird because most of the time you get nervous because it's bad and you're going to be in the position to compliment somebody.
I know, but I just thought The Kids in the Hall were so great.
They couldn't fuck up. Right.
No, I looked up to them. I was like, "You're doing the work I want to do, guys." Right. And still are. Like I've mad respect for the kids. Yeah. And I would improvise with them all the time, and I really loved it because one of the things that I love is comedy where comedy hadn't existed before. Right. Subjects that were not typically comedic subjects. One of the things about Python that I love, that's why I'm going over to see Python on Friday. I'm going to see that Python show in London. Yeah. Is to pay respects to, they're the Beatles of comedy as far as I'm concerned. Right. And, they're definitely on the periodic table of elements. Pythonium is definitely there. Sure. And they would find comedy where comedy traditionally had not existed. Right. So you had a lot of respect for the kids, and you go over there and you're sitting with Dave, and you see the pilot. Yeah, and I go into implementation and I go, "That's it. Close the patent office. Stick a fork in it. It's done. You guys, you bastards, you've done it. You've done it, you bastards." And I went into a existential funk. You did? Yeah, and Dave said, "I'm so happy that you're depressed." He said, "No, really, I can't tell you because I thought you were going to be like, oh, that's pretty good, but wow, I guess it must be good. You look suicidal. Great. I'm getting sharp objects out of your hand." I said, "Dude, it's just you did it. Like it's got a punk rock feel to it. You know what I mean? The interstitial music is ridiculously cool, and the Super 8 interstitials are fantastic. They nailed it. It's fantastic." And so then I thought, oh, well, I had my chance to be in The Kids in the Hall. So I go back for the 15th anniversry of Second City. Right. And that's when he saw me and said, "Go out there, And I thought I got nothing to lose. Because I've never thought that I was going to be discovered. I just didn't think that. I just thought I would be somebody who's a hard worker. And for me, things started to happen once I completely gave up the concept of being discovered. Absolutely. And I, in essence, discovered what I wanted to do. Right. And that would be my advice to young performers: is don't want to be famous, want to be legendary. Right. But in many ways, fame is the industrial disease of creativity. It's a sludgy byproduct of making things. Right. And it feels great. Right. For a while. Yeah. But it didn't bring my dad back from the dead, and didn't. Was your dad already gone by the time you did that? Yeah. No, my dad died in November 1991, but his personality had left his body from Alzheimer's. So it was tough. I mean, as things were taking off, I would head up to Toronto. He burnt himself in a bath, which was horrific, and
He just didn't know.
he just didn't know. It was very, very tough. It was, and it really. I mean, I had a real "What's it all about, Alfie" moment after Wayne's World came out, because he died November 22nd, 1991. The movie came out February 14th, 1992. I spread his ashes on the Mersey in Liverpool, as per his requests, in June, I think, June of 1992. And then I just put on weight. I put on like 30 pounds. I'd never had a weight problem. And then I just was like, I'm just not here. I just wasn't here.
That's the grief. You just eating the feelings. And
Yeah, because I didn't have a glossary of terms for it.
Right.
And it still hurts. I mean, it's, the one that got me recently is the birth of my second daughter, April 11th, Sunday. And it was tough, dude. I mean, I was in the hospital room, and that one got me more even than Spike, which is named after my dad. My dad's name was Spike, you know.
That he's not here to see you?
Yeah. It was sort of like, I know he would have wanted me to have 2 kids. He loved kids. He was he's a great dad.
Yeah.
He liked little girls, like because he had 3 boys.
Right,
so it was always
a treat.
It was always a treat to see, cousins and stuff.
Right. And he was alive when you had the big break.
Yeah, but he didn't really. He did see me on stage at Second City, which was fantastic, and he saw me in London. On stage, but he was heckling.
Oh,
yeah, he was saying things like, "Oh, the rest of you get off the stage. Michael's the only funny one."
Really?
Yeah. So it's one thing to have Alzheimer's, which is rough.
Yeah.
But he was such a shameless homer, like such a shameless believer in me.
Yeah.
So the truth that came out was, look, he's got a spark. The rest of you are just going through the motions. Super specific heckles. You don't even know what you're doing, do you, mate?
That's great.
Let Michael speak. He takes the scene forward.
Really?
Yeah, it was such hilariously specific. I told the cast, my dad has Alzheimer's, he's going to say something. And unfortunately, he also is eloquent.
Yeah.
And it might hurt a little bit, because part of it's going to be a little true.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So that night, though, that was it? So you didn't audition, you got discovered?
I got recommended.
To Lauren?
To Lauren, yeah. I did the show, and I did the last improv of this show.
Yeah.
With Martin Short. We did this whole thing, because Martin Short, they give a hard time because he's... I see that the tongue is in the cheek, but name drops. Mm-hmm. I think it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. So he did this thing called freeze tag at the end of the show. And I had steadily started to win over the crowd, like because of the Wayne sketch and this other thing. And so we were in this scene together, this improv scene, and I'd go, Marty, do you remember that time we're at Liza Minnelli's house and drinking white Puerto Rican rum? And Warren came over, Warren Beatty, and it was this whole thing of, and Dusty was there, Dustin Hoffman. And then he did his riff, and we did this for like 15 minutes. And it was like, the crowd went crazy. And it was just one of those things. Somebody else did another improv. Now, Del Close had started the improv talking about Reagan had just been assassinated. That's how long ago it was.
Right.
And didn't get killed. And his theory was that he couldn't be killed by conventional weapons.
Right.
To kill Reagan, you would need a silver bullet.
Right.
And so in the freeze tag, somebody had their hand pointed out like this. And I went freeze. And I said, all right, Mr. Reagan, this time I got the silver bullet. Yeah. Bang. Lights went out. Place went shithouse.
Good callback.
Yeah, but I was just in a flow state.
Sure.
I wasn't like, how do I get the call back?
No, right, yeah.
I was just loving it, having a great time. I go upstairs, and I don't know anybody, right? Because they're all the famous people.
Right.
Like Michael Keaton and blah, blah,
blah. Oh, really?
Blah.
Yeah.
And all these famous people come to the show, and all the SCTV cast. And I'm in the lineup being congratulated by everybody. Now, at halftime, I thought I was out. But Foley was so gracious to go, out? What are you kidding?
It's just starting.
They haven't seen Wayne's World yet, which is so lovely. Yeah. And then there's like 5 flights of stairs to where...
Dax Shepard with Bill Nye. Science guy.
Went to 50%. Yeah.
Well, you just beat me to it.
I had nothing to do with that. I wasn't consulted. I showed up.
And your older siblings, were they boys or girls?
My sister is oldest, and my brother is the troubled middle child.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did they?
He's not troubled. That's just something.
That's a
That's a
joke.
family irony.
If he were troubled, you probably wouldn't say he was.
That's right.
Yeah,
Good point.
That's kind of
Well
how we
said.
know he's not troubled. Okay, so let me take you to Cornell.
Cornell, that was a mistake on their
1973.
part.
That was
That was a clerical error in the admissions department, and
Sure.
they're still living with it.
Now, you studied mechanical engineering at Cornell.
Bicycles, airplanes is my thing.
So do you love the Wright brothers? Have you read the McCullough book?
Yeah. Now the Wright brothers. May I speak truth to power?
Please.
Yeah.
They got the patent and everything, but their airplane was kind of primitive. You've seen an Arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you put the tail feathers? In the front? You put them in the back.
Sure.
So people in France, especially, were going way ahead. We still have the words fuselage, aileron, empennage, longeron. These are all French words because they were, hey, let's put the tail feathers in the back. The Wright brothers, well, we got it working. We got it working. We're flying around. We're showing off. But their planes really were hard to fly.
Well, so you read that book, the McCullough
Yeah, it's
book.
good. Those guys were dint of hard work.
Well, what's so amazing about it is that they survived.
Yeah.
That's the most thing.
They
when
killed
you're
the guy.
reading-
Who's the guy they killed from the War Department?
Oh,
They
I
were
don't
giving
know
him a
about that.
ride and he crashed. Yeah.
Oh, I don't
And
feel like I
Wilbur-
remember that.
Wilbur
part.
lived through it and so on and so on.
But they crashed, Monica, dozens of times. They didn't know
Sure.
what they were doing. They were taking off from sand dunes. They were getting maybe a quarter mile, and they crashed, and they get a half mile, then a
Yeah.
mile, then they flew for 17 minutes, and that was a thing. But, and they're gaining altitude the whole time, and they're just crashing all the time, and they just lived. I mean, that's the most astounding thing of that whole story.
It really is. So, but more power to them. And I'm very happy that North Carolina says,
First in flight.
and Ohio says birthplace of flight.
Yeah.
Or do I interchange those?
No, you got that right. North Carolina's first in flight. We just went through the
Yeah.
state slogans yesterday by weird coincidence.
Of course you did.
Yeah. If you-
Normal thing to
If you
do.
were curious about any of them, just ask. But while you were there, you actually had a very unique opportunity to take astronomy with Carl Sagan.
Yes.
That's like
Changed my life.
Bill Gates living next to the library with a mainframe.
Yes.
Yes, this is a very auspicious.
Well, just stuff happens. But, understand there were hundreds, thousands of people who took Carl Sagan's classes. But he had a huge effect on me. Wow, yes. So I finished my mechanical engineering requirements, and then I took a freshman astronomy course as a senior. And
Well,
let me say,
So one of my very favorite classes in college was astronomy. And
Right
I'm
on.
curious if we have a similar reason of why it was so fascinating. I don't think there's a area in sciences that you can look at where more has been discovered with such little information. When you actually realize how they're learning what stars are burning by spectral analysis, and they're learning about Doppler shift, and what they put together by looking at a white dot, I think is the greatest example of what science can do. What they have learned by staring forever at some white light.
it's just amazing.
Isn't it incredible?
Oh, guys, so you guys just think about Copernicus. Everybody presumed that the sun went around the earth. That's what it looks like. You look at the sky, it just looks like the
it's
sun
going
is
around
going
us.
right over, just like the moon, all the stars, every night they move. But then Copernicus is like, I've been thinking about this. And if I'm trying to predict the position of Jupiter, the bright planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, I think we should look at it the other way. That is profound.
No,
Such an insight by just sitting and thinking about it.
It can't really even be comprehended how profound that is.
Then Galileo's got a military instrument, this telescope for looking at the bad guys on the other hill or whatever. And he took it out at night. You can't see the guys on the other hill at night. And he points it up, hey, man, the moon is full of pockmarks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have to imprison you. I'm sorry, man. We can't
Right.
have you spouting. Well, you look. No, we're not going to look.
Yeah.
No, we have to. You can't leave your house for the rest of your life. What the hell? So Edwin Hubble and how do I say it? Lemaire, these two guys were looking at the Doppler shift, and they decided that the universe is expanding.
Yes.
And then they reasoned later on that it must have started it from one place, which we humans right now call the Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really something else that we haven't inferred yet? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But there's two questions that get everybody. Where did we come from?
Mm-hmm.
Where did we come? What? And then are we alone? Are we the only entities thinking about this?
Right.
People. There are 200 billion stars in our galaxy, and there are at least that many galaxies.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the
And
other
you
thing.
think you got problems.
When you start trying to comprehend the full, it's
know.
nearly impossible. No matter how many analogies of a grain of sand on a beach, it just doesn't really do it justice. You had to be one of 200 billion.
And that's just here.
And,
Yeah, I know.
And
Oof.
mega clusters and all that stuff. It's really mind-blowing.
Well, but here's the other thing about it, though, that's so troubling right now. As you may know, I've run up against people who claim they believe, whether or not they really believe it is not clear, that the Earth is 6,000 years old. That's wrong. It's just objectively wrong.
Yes.
And the thing right now is alternative facts. What are you talking about? No, that's
So we were traveling this weekend for the podcast, and we were in a state in the middle of nowhere, and there was a sign. It was for a church. It had on it the age-old chimpanzee to human.
That's not right.
And then a big circle around it with a Xing it out, saying evolution is a hoax. And we drove by that sign, and I just started kind of my mind started wandering, and I was like, I've heard them say, well, yeah, God buried dinosaur bones
To fool
test
you.
to test your faith. Which,
What a jerk.
well, this is exactly what I would any parent who subscribes to that thought, that God, who is all knowing, all loving, created us, his children, is regularly testing us with really convincing stuff. So my analogy is, would you ever put a birth certificate in your child's dresser that said on it they had two different legal parents, to test their faith of whether or not you were their parents? Would you do that? Would that not be psychotic and masochistic? Who would try their hardest to fool their child into thinking that they had actually been adopted? It just begs the question, what kind of gentleman was it that created us to fool us? It's very confusing.
It's very troubling to me.
Yeah, it's very troubling, but
Because
I
the
don't
thing
want to
that-
alienate too many people, because
Well, the thing
I also
is-
recognize that people get a lot out of things that
Well,
I don't
they get
necessarily.
community. That's what you
Yeah.
get from a religion that's priceless.
Sure. Well, one of my things is I feel like people who don't believe the Earth is more than 6,000 years old should not be able to reap the fruits of that. So you're not allowed to have a cell phone.
Or how about
That's
Facebook?
Anything. Fine. If the Earth's 6,000 years old, cool. That's your worldview. Unfortunately, in your worldview, science isn't real, and your fucking iPhone doesn't work, so you can't use it. You can't get in a car. Internal
not how they
combustion
roll.
engine
No,
is
it's
not
not how
going to
they
work.
roll.
But no, you don't get it all. You don't get to deny it while actually using it. That's
But keep in
or
mind,
at least wear a shirt that says "I'm a hypocrite."
keep in mind that there are things that I believe, and I'm pretty sure all of us believe, that are wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we just don't know what those things are right now. I think about dark energy and dark matter. So we don't know what those are right now.
Right.
And then I think about my grandparents who grew up really with no knowledge or understanding of relativity until nuclear weapons were set off and nuclear fission and whatever. So I'll bet you in the next century, people will figure out what dark matter and dark energy is, and there'll be some crazy, amazing technological advancement as a result of it.
Yeah.
So I went and got a PET scan, positron emission tomography. If people didn't know that there were positrons until pretty recently, just think what else we don't know. And as former government employee and President Barack Obama remarked, if you couldn't control where you would be born on the earth, but you could control when, this is the time you'd want to be born. As much as you might think things suck, they suck less than they ever have in history, as we started talking about early on.
Although as a car nut, I do kind of maybe think in the 50s, so I could have owned those muscle cars right as they were in the showroom floor.
Well, now you can get a Tesla. You just don't need that. In fact, one of the three great inefficiencies of internal combustion engines is accelerating to get on the freeway. So we have to have engines big enough in our cars to enable us to go from 0 to highway
70,
speed
yeah.
in a few seconds. The other two inefficiencies are when you go downhill, you don't get any of that energy back.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a stoplight, you're sitting there, the giant engine's running just to run your CD player or listen to your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
CD may be an older reference to
Sure,
run your
A-track.
digital medium. These are inherent inefficiencies in internal combustion engines. The stop sign, downhill, accelerating onto the freeway. Okay. For those of you, what are we talking about? That's right, people. Second law of thermodynamics. The best you're going to do under perfect conditions is like 70%. You're going to lose 30%. You can't beat it. It sucks. And then all the mechanical friction in conventional cars, you get down to about 30% efficiency. 70% of the energy just goes out to the universe as heat. We can do better, people.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yeah.
It's not magic. It's Monica. It's
Science.
Math.
science.
Okay,
Math,
so
math.
You leave Cornell and you go to work for Boeing in
I was
1977. You were recruited. Were you apprehensive about moving all the way from one Washington
No, I was
to the
excited.
other Washington?
I
You
was
were.
excited.
Okay.
My
What
parents-
kind of guy were you in high school? Did you?
That's the same thing.
No, tell me. I don't know. It could
No,
be
I mean,
anything.
I was a clown. I was, you
Okay.
know, a nerd.
You did well though in school.
I
But,
did well enough. I had a very good physics teacher,
Okay.
Mr. Lang. I still am in emailical touch with him. I took, this was in the early days. I took the physics AP exam. I think I took it the second year it existed. And it was this new thing. And I guess I did okay on it.
Did you get a 5? We were just talking about AP exams the other
I don't
day.
think I got a 5. I think I
Okay.
got a 4.
Well, you only need to get a 3 as it turns out.
I told him
so.
that, and he was appalled.
I was 60%. That seems a little low.
Well, so whatever, as I have argued, I believe it was a clerical error in the admissions department. And then I showed up, and now what are we going to do with him?
Well, you go to Boeing,
I
right?
was recruited.
You were recruited. You've made that abundantly
No, but
clear.
here's what I'm saying.
Yes, tell me.
When you get an engineering degree, this is a choice I made. I went to college with a purpose. And so I got a job, and yes, I had student loans, but one thing led to another, and I paid them off. And, it's just, we have to reckon our relationship with college.
In what fashion?
We want,
I don't know what side of the argument you're
well,
on.
I'm on both sides.
Okay.
That just who's the most employable, by my understanding, and I don't have the data with me, bust my chops, but the most employable liberal arts major is philosophy. Apparently, philosophy majors are flexible and can
But
take
that's
any role.
because they go to law school for the most part.
Oh, really?
A lot of them
That's
do,
a
yeah.
pretty heavy transfer. That
Yeah.
poli-sci and history. Yeah.
But you're saying if you want to get a job
James Altucher with T.J. Miller. I do not know how to pronounce James' name. Sorry.
They're not going to say, we don't accept Bitcoin. They could say, you'll have to turn your Bitcoin into Amazon, coins, but you still, you're still able to move freely with Bitcoin.
I mean, people don't realize how close. I mean, maybe people do realize, but in 2008, 2009, the dollars in your pocket were almost worthless. Like, and then, this centralized bank started pumping so much dollars into the economy. It was a guess. Nobody really knew what would happen to the dollar. And to your point about Trump and these tariff wars, who knows when there's a tipping point where we can go too far? It's always some financial innovation or some financial danger that we've never hit before that kind of throws everything upside down. So like when you ask what's next, it's got to be something from the financial world where we're in an area where people don't understand.
Exactly. I mean, it's got to be something that no one can predict. That's what The Big Short was about, that
Yeah.
only a couple people were like, hey, wait a second. The housing market, we need to sure it's become overvalued. Like these stocks that for the tech companies that went public. I mean, WeWork is dealing with that right now. That
Yeah.
it's the latest thing where it's like, this might be a company that's going to lose money and has lost money and is not going to turn a profit. So that whole model is really, really strange to me. But I think, the thing that nobody's really talking about is that China doesn't care about its people. And America, for the most part, the president doesn't care about the American people, but America does care about every person. And in China, so if you go to war with China for a tariff war or something, they're going to win because they're willing to have their people starve or their lives go south. And Americans they're not used to that. They're not, I'll do anything for the country. I'm a slave to the country. So I think the other thing is people aren't really understanding how different these other countries are that he's fooling around with, It's just very strange. And North Korea, that guy's crazy. Like, what's to say he doesn't just decide, like, let's launch a, missile just to scare the United States, and I'll go in a bunker, and if a bunch of the people in my country die, well, that's just what happens. It's just a very strange time right now. But I do love, I always talk about this with Cash Levy. I have a podcast, Cashing In with TJ Miller. Check it out. It's on Himalaya, which is an app that nobody uses. It's also on iTunes and Stitcher and gregspods.org, which is a made up site. And, but you kind of,
I like that as a .org.
I know it's a .org. It has to be.
It's a charitable.
I can't say
podcast
.gov. They'll get upset with me. Cash Levy and I are always talking about how we're just so lucky that the founding fathers of this country were such geniuses that they set up a system that we complain about when nothing gets done. But when what has happened, he kind of can't tear the whole thing down. There's just too many checks and balances and too much red tape, And once we kind of got Congress, then it was like everybody could sigh a little bit of, relief because, if it's a completely Republican held government, then some damage can be done. But if you have just one of the checks and balances be, at least somewhat sane, but it's crazy that Republicans kind of fell in line with him. I just never thought that would happen. You just didn't think that they could stoop that low. And then they did, because they just all are so afraid of losing.
Who do you want for 2020?
I still would like somebody to emerge as I think everybody's going to vote for who they think can beat him. That's kind of what this has become, which is dangerous, guessing what the rest of the country, who they're going to vote for. I think Yang is really interesting and would be a really great, we started giving a little bit of money to him. But I think Yang would be interesting for a lot of reasons. And I just I think Elizabeth Warren looks too much like Hillary Clinton. That's how superficial this country can be. And I think that Bernie kind of doesn't have the momentum that he had when he first ran. And that, if you see that documentary Michael Moore did, he really got robbed of that nomination. But so I don't know. So we've sort of stopped giving him money just to kind of see what he can do without our, I also really realized that you have to look at the bigger picture. It is a populist vote that is going to win this thing. And so I don't know. Yang would be so cool because he's approaching it from such a different standpoint,
Well, I feel like Yang could sit here at the table with us and just have a conversation. Whereas if it's like other candidates, it feels like it would be more practiced or rehearsed.
Right.
Whereas
exactly.
Yang is, and
he's got good ideas. People are like, what is this universal basic income? Give me a break. Even Bernie's talking about it. It's like, if you just tax the 0.01%, just a little bit more, that's just billions of dollars in revenue.
Also, Yang
billions. It's only 350 million Americans.
But Yang also says if you put a 10% sales tax on everything, normally that's considered hurtful to poorer people. But his point is, if I'm giving $12,000 a year to people, they're still better off unless they spend $120,000 a year, which they're not going to do because they're only making $12,000 a year. So he's got the math, whereas a lot of these other candidates don't have the math for what they're saying. And it's interesting down each point. Like his book, The War Against Normal People, is he explains each thing. It's really good.
Seeing it, I'm going to read that one. But I don't know. It's really frustrating because it's like, if he had a prayer, I would just get behind him completely. But he would have to really mobilize the younger vote. And so many people are still in Bernie's camp. And I think so many women are kind of going, she's got to have a pussy. This president's got to have a pussy. And so Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, and I'm like, what happened to AOC? Like, it's just gotten really, really. Kamala Harris, we know her. She's brilliant. But she's sort of faded into the background. It's very strange. Beto O'Rourke, people liked for a second, but now he's got a security team carrying around Nerf guns and stuff. It just seems like nobody knows how to capture the American public's attention. And that's a real problem because that's all he needs is for people to be split. And Biden, I think, would be a good president if only that he kind of hasn't really bought into all this stuff. He's still kind of making fun of the outrage culture. And that is, I think, what connects with Americans right now. I think Americans are waiting for somebody to go, this internet cancel culture bullshit, give me a break. Oh, I smelled somebody's hair. Who cares? And he's got some, he's going to get good things done. He's not going to do anything bad. But I would vote for a rock, instead of this guy. I'd vote for a dog that has developmental issues. Like, it's just a bad situation. And anybody who disagrees is like not paying attention or just is doubling down on their mistake. I mean, it was sort of a mistake. I don't know that she would have been great, but she would have been a lot better than the situation that we found ourselves in now.
Yeah, and we had a guy
especially
on
with climate changes. Like, that's starting to be what people should be talking about. Kate and I always say if we ran for president, we would just focus on two things: climate change and the economy. That's all anybody cares about. If you really boil it down, not pro-life, not pro-choice, not any of that stuff. It's climate change and the economy.
Why do you think not just the economy? Because like you said earlier, people just want to know they're making a little extra money so they could go to Disneyland
Younger
twice.
people don't. They're thinking about climate change.
But younger people don't vote is the problem.
Well, if you focus on climate change and you were like, I need your vote so that we can fix this thing and save the human species, by the time she and I would run, and it's never been done that you would run on the same ticket. There's never been a husband and wife that ran for president. It's always like a first lady, or it would be a first husband or something. So they've never done that. And that would be a really dynamic thing because you could balance each other out. One of you could be like, I think these fucking idiots are, and the other person is like, he gets excited about this stuff, but we need to find a middle road. And
so was that you and imagining you and Kate talking to the public?
Yeah, or we can turn it around the other way. It doesn't matter. You just have to manipulate them into voting. Just kidding.
We had a professional campaign guy on the podcast the other day, and he was saying how whoever wins Iowa, out of all elections, 43% of them, whoever wins Iowa wins the nomination. So and the problem is Andrew Yang's not campaigning in Iowa.
No, he is.
Oh, he is?
He just set up offices and he has two people. Or no, he's got a full-time staff of 8 or something. He knows that that's his Hail Mary. If he can somehow get Iowa to get behind him as a person, he could do it. The problem is Iowa's exactly almost 50-50 in terms of their ideology of Des Moines, which is like super hip, young, very cool, very smart. And then all of your farmland and smaller towns that are it's just such a strange mix now, but much more so than 4 years ago. I mean, I played Des Moines just recently, and it is barcade, coin-op bars, and vegan pizza places. I mean, it's becoming a place like Omaha where you're like, yeah, right, Des Moines, Iowa.
Bill Engvall with Jeff Foxworthy.
And do you remember that we found that stupid hat, and that was the crown? If you did the stupidest thing in the snow, then you were the king of the Totally Insane Club.
King of the Totally Insane Club, yeah.
So let me ask you, I know you're like me, the farm, it's like your wife, your kids, and then the farm.
Sometimes not. Sometimes not in that order.
Depending on the day. It's funny, Jeff. We talk about getting older and stuff. It's like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have started to realize that the older I get, the more the simple stuff I really enjoy. And I think about when I'm down at our ranch. I often think about you sitting on your ranches. There's something like when you're in your 20s, you don't really care about a sunrise or. Look at this pretty deer coming in.
Well, you're too busy. Yeah, you're running.
Yeah, and I wonder if sometimes we don't, as a human race, if we don't just, if that would help things out, if we would all just kind of take a minute just to stop and go, because Gail and I always have this discussion. I feel like we've become this throwaway generation now that just everything's got to be quick. If your cell phone breaks, just get a new one. If your marriage isn't working, just get divorced. You'll get another wife. And I just worry that sometimes we have become this society that it's just everybody's in such a big hurry that they're really not, as the old saying goes, not taking time to smell the roses.
Oh, I definitely think so. You know, because I always think about that verse, "Be still and know that I am God." And we're a society that nobody's ever still anymore. You're just running and running and running. And it kind of eliminates critical thinking. And by critical, not being like judgmental, but critical by really thinking something out. And we've kind of lost that ability because we don't slow down enough to really ponder things. You know, we're becoming more shallow. You know, I think the truth is life is probably, it's pretty simple, but it's deep, you know, and the way we live, we kind of make it shallow and complicated. And so I'm with you. It's the older I get, I'm like, you know, there's a lot to be said for a sunrise, for sitting around just talking to friends. I don't, you know, without a phone in your hand. And it's those simpler things that we've kind of got away from. And I think a lot of people are starting to go, crap, I miss that.
Yeah, exactly. I you mentioned the cell phones. I have a personal belief that the cell phones were the death of society. No one looks at each other anymore. It's like you just said. So you ever look at your cell phone? I asked the audience there, and I said, how many times have you done this? You pick up and look at your cell phone, and it didn't buzz, it didn't ding, it didn't do anything. You just picked. It's like I go, that has to be the definition of an addiction. You know,
it is an addiction. It's totally an addiction, or you can't go anywhere without it. You know, which is just nuts. I mean, even like in the car, you know, when we were growing up, you drove. Hell, I drove to Florida with nobody knowing where I was. You know, you didn't have to call when you got there. And hell, now as a parent, you can track your kids and, he's at the gas station in Valdosta now. You know,
it's like, thank God they didn't have these things when I was in college.
No kidding.
If my parents wanted to get hold of me, good luck. You know.
Yeah. Well, really.
And I did it to my kids, you know, and I swear, you know, and I felt bad. It's like, you know, but it's there, and hey, I'm going to see what Travis or Emily's doing. It's like, you know, they're off at college. Let them live their life. If they need you, they'll get hold of you.
Yeah, you wouldn't have wanted somebody pegging you when you were at college. So,
you know, I got to tell. For people who don't know, I really want to kind of get into, because this. It's something I'll always remember and always cherish too. Is that, you know, people always ask, and I'm sure you probably get it too. Is how did you guys meet? How'd you guys get involved? And I always tell people, I said, Jeff and I our paths would cross in the comedy clubs. You know, that, you know, we would just, you know, as you were leaving, I was coming in, or vice versa. And I said, you know, it was one of the things, like when you went out to LA and then I came out later, and I signed with, we had the same management. And I'll never forget this, because, you know, you were hitting the stratosphere at that point. And I remember you said, hey, why don't you come on out on the road with me? You know, because I was still, you know, when Here's Your Sign came out, I was literally, and I say this with all honesty, I was just a club act with a record deal. And I didn't understand about performing and stuff. And you took me out on the road with you, and I opened for you for a couple of years. And I just will never forget that, because I remember, I think that's part of the problem. And I don't want to sound like the old guy, like, this is what's wrong with these kids today. But I think that they don't get, you know, these days, a kid gets 5 minutes on a YouTube video and everybody thinks he's the next coming of comedy. You know, I don't think that these kids get to do what we did, and that's, you know, because we weren't in that immediate gratification field yet. You know, we did our shows because we loved it, and you took me out, and I learned a whole lot from you about how people, when you go see someone to show, you go, okay, they know what they're doing. You know,
but don't you think so much of that came from the clubs?
Oh yeah.
You know, it's kind of one of the, because back when we started in the boom in the 80s, I mean, you had two options. You could go to New York or LA and hope to get on, you know, 2 or 3 times a week and do 5 minutes, or you could go on the road and you could work every night. I remember going back through my calendars, and I had 8 years in a row, I did at least 500 shows.
Yeah.
And but there was something in that. It's like the old Malcolm Gladwell thing, is you have to do something 10,000 hours to become an expert at it. well, that's what we did.
Right.
You know, we not only worked, then we sat around and talked about it. You know, and we watched each other and we helped each other. And so, you know, I tell people that about Blue Collar was we all became friends early on in the process. You know, I saw Ron the first time he ever went on stage. You and I were kind of on parallel paths,
right.
And that we both kind of rose through it quickly. So we were both headlining, and so we didn't get to work together. But like you said, you know, we'd follow each other. Or it was a treat when I actually got to watch you do comedy. But you know, there's something about that. There's a kindred spirit kind of thing about people that went through the clubs like that. And it's kind of got to the point is you were kind of prepared for anything. It's like the guy playing minor league ball for 8 years. Once you got to the bigs, you'd seen it all.
Right. Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I think that, and I think that's what's missing. You know, everybody says, you know, they'll say to me, well, who's the new young up-and-coming? I go, I really don't know. Because it's like it was almost like, for lack of a better term, I think it was almost like a fraternity of, you know, like you said, we hung out afterwards. We talked. We basically were live-ins for almost 10 years on Blue Collar. You know, it's like.
Well, and you know, here's the other thing. We worked at it, you know, right. and I always say that's kind of the common denominator of when you look back at the people that we started with, the common denominator was the people that were successful, and not all of them ended up being successful stand-ups, but they went on to be writers in L.A. or to do other things, you know, like the Judd Apatows. But the people that were successful at it worked at it. Mm-hmm. You know, and you were one of those guys, and you're still that way. You're as prolific as I think just about any comic that ever lived. And for the people listening, here's what I always say is I tell my friends in the music business, hey, if you write 4 hits, you play to your 90. Right. Because people are going to come to hear those 4 songs. You know, you can do it. They'll tolerate the new stuff. But with a comic, it's the opposite. If you do an album or if you do a special or, yeah, you do a DVD, that's gone. Now you've got to go, you know, and so you think about how many albums and how many specials you've done. Mm-hmm. And you look back and go, oh, my God, that's a mountain of material. I was doing a gig last weekend for a homeschoolers convention, and they were like, no.
Sam Tripoli with Brendon Walsh. We're going into conspiracy world here. God bless.
Every single one of them basically makes it to 100.
Yeah, we were talking the other day. I put this on Twitter. How many elites have died from cancer? They came up with 2.
Yeah.
Disney, I think, and Steve Jobs. That's it. Yeah. Like nobody. Like I know multiple people just in my life that have passed away from cancer. Yeah. Of the elites, I can name 2 over the years and years and years.
I was just talking to somebody about that. It's just like, is it like, what do? You get like MRIs every 6 months? Like, I mean, obviously they have the best medical care, but to completely avoid any kind of like anything killing you besides being 99.
Yeah. I mean,
that's the leading cause of death of all politicians is being 99.
Yeah. I mean, the Rockefeller just passed away. He was on his 8th heart transplant.
Yeah.
He's going straight to the line, dude.
How do you I know. That's like, you know. But yeah, everything's fair, everything's even, you know.
So we want to get into the dark hands of things. I go, what do you want to talk about? And you kind of listed some stuff, and they were all kind of in the same realm of, you know, false flags and, you know, this whole thing with hoaxes. You know, this is a dangerous time, dude. And these dangerous times, I think we need a dangerous podcast. And this might be one of the most dangerous podcasts of them all. And that's because I can kind of look at most of these false flags. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, man. as I've done this research, I realize I've been wrong on some stuff. So that was kind of cool. It's either wrong or the information has been wiped from the internet. So
that's been my, like I said, before I had a kid and stuff, I would take my computer, my laptop to bed, fucking go down, pick a rabbit hole and fucking go down it. Lately, I mean, ever since, I don't know if it's the net neutrality thing, YouTube, it's anything, you type in anything like Sandy Hook conspiracy, the top 50 results are from like ABC, CBS, like it's all just, and they're all videos saying like, another nut says that it's a conspiracy. Like there's no, like I just was like, because we were talking about JFK Jr. and there were like some good videos. And now it's just like everything's basically been wiped from YouTube. Somebody's got to make.
Well, it's these AIs, dude. When we label this show, I have to keep keywords out because they'll just shadow ban it or they'll demonetize it. Like I can't on YouTube describe what we're going to talk about in this episode. Really? People are going to have to listen to it and just trust me. That's an interesting topic. Yeah. Because if I put what we're talking about, it will get fucking banished to YouTube hell.
You'll just have to be like hashtag unicorn sugar frosted flakes.
But there are like just articles that I know I read that I could not find.
Can't find them, yeah.
No matter how much I changed it up, it did not show up. I'll get into these articles that I could not find.
How easy it is to control the message, control the medium.
Well, I want to get into where I think this all starts, and it starts very much with Lincoln, right? Lincoln's the first kind of conspiracy that we all know of. He gets assassinated.
Yeah.
Who assassinates him? John Wilkes Booth, right? Who turns out to be
it's like a Freemason or
Freemason level 33 Freemason.
Okay.
All in a bunch of like the conspiracy. There's so many conspiracies with this. Elvin Pike, right? Albert Pike is the guy who basically starts the Civil War by like basically paying for fucking unrest in the South. Like he begins this. This is the guy who put out the 3 different World War IIIs, right? The different wars he wants to the New World Order. There's a gentleman, they say, Edwin Stanton was in charge of the cover-up, they say, of assassination of Lincoln, okay? And that the story, according to a couple articles, is that the body that they found wasn't even John Wilkes Booth, that they had just found somebody and burned him. And they said that it was Wilkes. And, we've seen that a bunch of times. If you look at like what went on with Hitler, right? Like how that's not his body. Well, it's a female's
was there ever
body.
Like a body? They were just like, he killed himself in a bunker.
The official story is so crazy that the Russians put out, because the Russians are the ones that discovered him. They buried him. They exhumed him. They buried him again. There's all this like multiple burials and moving them to different locations. So it's like.
And then when they tested the actual bones, it was female.
And that's like Bin Laden too. It's just like we're living. Everything is so surreal. It's been very surreal since 9/11. I think has like really been a big turning point of like what you think you saw you didn't see.
Yeah.
I mean that was like the kind of the official story for JFK too, where it's like he got shot in the face. No.
Yeah.
Got shot by one shot back to and it's like, well, how did the bullet like the whole?
Why is he grabbing his throat?
It's just that's like, and once the government figured out that can be the official story is like, nah, what you think you saw you didn't see, and anybody who says they saw what they saw
demonize
is
them.
Fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And that like the Bin Laden thing where it's just like. What? You fucking got, like, this guy's been a boogeyman for over a decade. Oh, no, we got him. Threw him in the ocean. It's fine.
Yeah. Can't see the
body.
No,
we got him,
Can't
there's
see
no proof.
nothing.
No proof. We don't need no proof of that. We threw him in the ocean.
And by the way, all the Navy SEALs involved with that are now dead, except for one guy who wrote the book who kind of says the official narrative. Right?
Fuck.
So here, did you ever know, we talk about this, but you say you actually found proof that Russia backed Lincoln. Have you ever heard that?
I have heard that, yeah. That
And this is kind of where the Red Scare begins, even though the Red Scare goes all the way back to the Khazarians and how Russia and Khazarians used to battle all the time.
Okay.
And the Khazarians now are somewhat to be the Rothschilds and all these like the black nobility guys and all that stuff, and how there's always been a battle between them and the Russians for like ever.
It's just nonstop. I mean,
I forget,
in a nutshell.
What is the What's the Russia-Lincoln thing? I remember reading that.
In October 1862, an ultimatum was issued to the North and South to end the war or face a more resolute action from Britain. So they're like, what? Fuck you. We're going to continue fighting, you know? Union morale was therefore at its lowest in 1863, despite victories at Gettysburg, Vicksburg, and amidst the crisis, rescue came from an unlikely source, which was Russia. At this time, Russia was also facing its own insertion from its subjects, the Poles, who supported by France and Britain.
Yep.
So this is their idea. Facing the same hostile coalition brought the governments of Lincoln and Alexander II together. Alexander had also freed the Russian serfs and thus sympathized with the Union's cause.
Yeah, for sure.
He's like, we had slaves, but no more.
So what happens is these international bankers go in, set up centralized banks in especially all these European countries, control the money, you control the military, and they use these militaries to go take out other countries that don't have centralized banks. And that was at the time, the United States had kicked out that version. I think it was the First National Bank or something they called it. That first version got kicked out, and that's when Lincoln puts out greenbacks.
On September 1863, the Russian Baltic Fleet arrived at New York and the Far East at San Francisco. So it came on both sides of the coast to save us. It arrived at a crucial point when Britain and France were on the verge of interfering, and they're like, because they're going to come in on the side of the Confederacy.
Because and the only deal was that the Confederacy would have to agree to a centralized bank.
So this is started way back, way back.
Yeah. So that's the first time. Now let's fast forward to the next kind of really traumatizing one, which is obviously JFK.
Yeah.
You know, here's a guy. And what do we have in common with these two things? Wanted to get rid of centralized bank. JFK was very anti-intelligence agency. That's a big part of this whole group, the mob. Mob was he had basically a recipe for an assassination.
Yeah.
Piss off the CIA, piss off the Federal Reserve, piss off the mob. Shit's going to go down.
Yeah. I mean, the Federal Reserve, I think, is the biggest one,
for sure.
You know.
For sure, man. And then look who's there, because here's a common guy. Look who's here. So Trump does this big CIA JFK documents dump. Doesn't dump all of them.
Okay.
But dumps a lot of stuff. And one of the things they released that I don't know why it got was, did you find it? It's a separate email. It's basically this document that basically puts George Bush in Dallas that day.
Yeah. Well, there's a photograph of a guy
leaning against the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's him. The way he stands, the shape of his head. I mean, he's totally there. That was the JFK Jr. I think the Bushes killed him too.
Oh, for sure, dude.
Because that's like, who would have won because it was 99 when he died.
Right.
When he died in a plane crash, where if you like do any research on that, like there was none of the fucking protocol was followed that day.
Yeah.
Much like 9/11 too, where it's just like, there's like 4 planes missing off the radar.
Yeah.
Nah, keep the fucking fighter jets grounded.
Cheney's calling people. ICE having multiple heart attacks.
Yeah.
Sends them out to the ocean. Go into the sea. Just fly around the sea.
Oh, really? The Pentagon got hit by a plane? Isn't that the most
we'll get
protected
into that.
fucking building in the universe? But JFK Jr., like, so that whole thing when his plane went off radar, went missing and stuff, like there was no protocol followed by the FAA that day. But was my thinking even back then was like, well, if he ran for president, like who's going to fucking win? A guy named John F. Kennedy or a guy named George Bush?
Well, dude, I mean, think about what the Bushes did. In particular, George Bush Sr.
Oh, yeah.
He wiped out the fucking political family of the United States and inserted his own family in there. We now have multiple Bushes as president when it should have been multiple Kennedys.
Yeah.
How many Kennedys ran and how many of them were fucking taken out?
Yeah.
They did it over and over again. Then let's go to the Reagan's fucking assassination.
The attempt? Oh, that was totally Bush. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know. It's so fucking and people talking about like Vladimir Putin, where they're just like, he's a fucking monster. He's a KGB guy. And I didn't do the tweet, but I wanted to do a tweet like, yeah, that's crazy. Could you imagine if we had a guy who was head of the CIA as president? And then, like, His son?
Yeah, I mean, dude, the guy takes out so Hinckley tries to take out Reagan.
Yeah.
Who would benefit most from that?
Bush.
George
he
Bush.
gets to be president.
Here's the thing about Hinckley. His father and George Bush are friends from fucking oil days in Texas. They're both oil men.
Yeah.
Dude, George Bush Jr. says that Hinckley is actually his friend, a good family friend.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And just think about this. What did Hinckley do? Go to a mental facility? So we're told?
Yeah, that's the thing too, where it's just like, where, you know.
And when we get told this, like these people that commit these crimes,
Thank you, folks, for listening. Tune in next week for more podcasts of all podcasts. So the dude's blind, and the kid, drums, from Zimbabwe. Enjoy some world music.